let me give you a very quick walkthrough on how fat loss works, how your metabolism works, and also why we gain fat. Okay, so why do we actually accumulate body fat? Now, I'm going to explain this using Metabolism Co. This is a big company up here. You'll have heard about metabolism before. What does it really mean? I'm going to explain that all now. Now, when we talk about metabolism, what we're really talking about is something called our total daily energy expenditure. TDEE for short. You might see that acronym around. Now that acronym consists of, or the TDEE consists of 4 departments within Metabolism Co. You got basal metabolic rate, you have your non-exercise activity thermogenesis, you have exercise activity, and you have something called a thermic effect of food, which is basically just the food you eat. Now these 4 departments, they each have different levels of expenditure. BMR is the most costly department. It contributes the most to your metabolism as we talk about it. And this is things like keeping the lights on. This is like if you're in a coma, your BMR wouldn't change that much because it's your brain, it's your hormones, it's things moving within your body which need to keep you alive essentially. Now that's a significant amount of your metabolism. How much depends on the individual, but it's like a significant amount. Now, non-exercise activity, thermogenesis, NEAT for short, is the next big spending department. This is things like I'm moving my arms right now, and that's not exercise, but it still requires energy. If you walk around and you have an active job, you burn a lot of energy. Like a scaffolder, there's a construction site outside to the left of the camera. Those guys are going to burn a lot through NEAT on a daily basis versus someone sitting in an office who doesn't expend that much energy. So that's what non-exercise activity is. That's why when we talk about movement, we talk about steps, when we talk about being an active person, it really contributes a lot to this figure. The next department, the third department, is exercise. So exercise activity. Now, everyone knows about this one. And that's when people think, oh, I'm going to burn 1,000 calories in my Barry's bootcamp class. Amazing. My TDEE will go up by 1,000 calories. Wrong. Our bodies are smart. And we have something called metabolic adaptation, or actually it's not metabolic adaptation, it's energy. We have something called the energy compensation effect. If we really go to town on exercise, what our body does is it down-regulates some of the other departments, in particular NEAT, and in particular possibly BMR. That's still a bit unclear in the research. NEAT is an obvious one. If you imagine the time you've done a big run, some sort of big, massive amount of energy, of exercise, later in the day, you don't even want to pick the remote up. You don't want to do certain things because your body down regulates. So you don't fidget as much, you don't move as much. You literally just lie down. You might even fall asleep. So that's the energy compensation effect. That's why when you burn 1,000 calories in your Barry's bootcamp or on your run or whatever, it's not just adding 1,000 to the total daily energy expenditure. How much is the down regulation? It depends. But in research, there was a big study done on this, and basically 28% was the average. So if you've done 1,000 calories extra of exercise, only 280 calories were minused off that through down regulation. So like 720 calories you actually added to the total from your 1,000 calorie run. Hopefully that makes sense. The last department is thermic effect of food. So the food you eat. What does this mean? Well, food, you can think of this as a tax. So when you consume certain foods, your body essentially taxes the food for the processing of the food. So that's going to get confusing if I use that word. To break down the food, your body kind of taxes it. And it requires some energy to break down food. So high fiber foods, high protein foods, fruits and veg, whole foods, these things, it requires more energy to break down. So if you have 1,000 calories of whole food, high fiber food, less total net calories are going to get into your body because your body uses energy to actually unlock the calories from within. If you have 1,000 calories of highly processed food, your body doesn't really tax it that much. It's already broken down. It's already basically digested. Your body's going to take most of that up. So what food you eat actually directly impacts your energy expenditure. Now, these 4 departments equal your total daily energy expenditure. That's 1/2 of the equation. The other half of the equation I'm going to come to in a second. But it's important to understand when I talk about energy, what I'm really talking about is calories with a capital C. This just means energy. It's the amount of energy required to raise water by 1 degree. And that's a calorie, a kilocalorie. But with a capital C, it's calories. That's one half of the equation. So what happens when the intake of food we get, so the intake of energy, which is the food and the drinks you consume, if the intake exceeds the sum expenditure of these 4 departments, your body's like, oh, we've got some surplus here. What do we do with the surplus? Well, let's store it, because historically, that's been important in our evolution. We're not going to give away calories to the environment. So we store it as fat. And in a kilogram of body fat, you have around 8,260 calories locked within it. That's how many calories are stored within a kilogram of body fat. So when you have a surplus, your body goes into storage mode and stores the calories. And it stores them in the form of body fat. It can also store them as muscle, but that's a separate topic. If you've accumulated body fat and you have that body fat sitting on your body, those little blocks of 8,260 calories per kilo, how do you get rid of it? Well, you need to make these 4 departments exceed it. Thing is, for reasons I've already said, that's very difficult because you have that energy compensation effect I mentioned before. So if you just try and do a ton of exercise, your body's going to be like, what the hell? We're going to downregulate some of that. It's not efficient. The best way to do it is reduce the intake. And what you need to do is reduce the intake so the intake comes below this figure. And that's what, when we talk about controlling our food and controlling our calories, that's what we're really trying to do. We're trying to bring total calories and total energy consumed under our TDEE. And then you get fat loss. It's simple as that. Now, there are barriers to this and boundaries to this, like the lower you go into a deficit, can get quite complicated. You don't just want to stop eating. That would be a disaster. But this is generally how fat loss works. This is the principles of fat loss. This is the principles of fat storage. And that's how it works. When we build muscle that we do in the gym, it makes this whole process significantly easier because we have another route to fat loss, which is called nutrient partitioning. So when our bodies are stimulated, when we've stimulated new muscle growth and our bodies are trying to create that new muscle, that also requires calories. So we kind of redirect. If you imagine a river and you imagine a mountain with a river flowing down it and it's flowing into one reservoir, that's normally where the surplus calories go. If you start lifting weights, you essentially put a little dam there and you divert some into a different reservoir, your muscle. So that's why we lift weights. But ultimately, this is what you need to understand if you want to lose body fat. And the amount of your deficit, think of the deficit as being funded by the body fat you have. So the calorie deficit, which is created by reducing intake to allow this figure to exceed the intake, that creates a deficit. Body fat funds the deficit, aka fat loss. This is totally different to when people talk about fat burning. Acute fat burning, when people talk about a HIIT class or like, you become a fat burning machine on ketogenic diet, that's totally different. That's acute fat burning and it's completely irrelevant. You can literally just forget about that. It doesn't matter. I can explain why separately. But for now, this is what you need to know. Hopefully it's helpful. If you have any questions, you know where to find me.